Okay, welcome back everyone, and so we are on the 10th session today, and this is the last session we are looking at before the Diwali break, and certainly this is also the last session in the philosophy part of it. This course is actually philosophy and ethics, so I'll have 3 sessions only on ethics later. So yeah, so we are looking basically at so if you remember, I had told you that we are looking at 6 philosophies, so we are at the last one, the philosophy of yoga. So there is what is called as the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, which talk about yoga. So we are actually going to look at the thought process behind that, and also behind the entire yoga system in general. So yesterday's session I know was a bit too kind of little heavy, and I also felt that there was a lot of material that I ended up covering, so I'll kind of next time I'll redistribute the material a little bit better. But today's session is not so intense, so it's a little more lesser number of slides, so hopefully it will not be that taxing to your brain to understand what we're talking. Right, so we start with the basic Puranic model of worship, also the 4 yoga systems summarized, the philosophy as per that. So I wish to start with this topic on, which we have already done, which is nothing but the 3 modes. So how this topic is connected is because the basic point here is that people are different. Because psychology is different, people are different. And because people are different, there are different things that attract different people. Right? I mean, different because of your basic difference in personality, you are attracted to a different kind of lifestyle. And even in the domain of yoga and worship in general also, people have that particular differences in attraction. So to make the point a little more simple, the way somebody who is prominently in goodness would be attracted to a particular yoga system, somebody prominently in tamas would not have the same kind of attraction because of the change in personality. So that's why the Puranic model of worship in general is different for different people. So I'll just kind of connect it to the topic that I had yesterday. Though I was talking about karma and we even spoke in the context of mercy about killing animals, etc., you will still see that there are several worship where all over the world where animal sacrifice, for example, is recommended. I mean, right now, for example, the Navratri festival goes on, and if you ever go to Calcutta or somewhere in Bengal, you will see that there are several Kali temples where it looks more like a slaughterhouse actually. There are a lot of goats and buffaloes and several animals are slaughtered, and the meat is actually sold as prasad outside. So one may wonder, why is it like that then? If the thought process is like this, then how come something like this is permitted or done under the name of worship? So for that we need to understand the 3 modes. The point is, somebody who is in tamas would be attracted to such kind of things only primarily. And that's why there is a literature, there is a facility where he is allowed to, do those kind of things in a limited fashion. Okay, so just to make it more clear, for example, in the Puranic, I'm not actually going into the Puranas in this course at all, because the main topic is the 6 systems of philosophy, but still I'm just touching it only on this slide. There is what is called as the 18 Puranas in the Indian system of literature. And these 18 are divided as 6, 6 and 6. So where 6 is prominently for those who wish to increase sattva, 6 is for those who are in rajas, and 6 is for those who are in tamas. So now if you see the literature of those who are in tamas, they recommend several things and they permit several things. So now I'll just tell you the thinking behind why they do that. So for example, if you see the 6 Puranas which are primarily targeting an audience who is attracted to tamas, they allow a lot of concessions, which perhaps the others don't. So for example, in India, you will see that there are certain temples or places dedicated to Shiva, where you will see some sadhu smoking some ganja or charas. And he will tell you that this is actually prasad of our God. He'll be smoking. Yeah, there is. There are, so the question is, how is that, what is that connection of that to worship? The connection is as simple as this. The guy is prominently in tamas. That's what attracts him. So in order to regulate him, there is a concession being offered. It's just like a patient is a drug addict and he goes to a psychiatry treatment, where a rehabilitation center where they are trying to remove him out of drugs. So the doctor tells him, you smoke 5 cigarettes a day. And that's it. Give up the other stuff. Now the doctor's advice that you smoke 5 cigarettes a day is not a global advice. It's not that doctors all over India have decided that it's best to smoke 5 cigarettes a day for every man to be healthy. It's a very specific advice to that individual who's coming from a background of charas, ganja and God knows what. So he's told that, "Oh, sab band karo, 5 cigarettes se kuch raho bas." And then later he's told, okay, reduce it to 3 now. That will be good for you. You understood? So like these Puranas basically give that kind of facility. So for example, there are days and there are rituals connected with it. Like in the Puranic affair, if you see there are certain days, like an Amavasya, the moonless night, is said to be a night where one is allowed to sacrifice a goat or a buffalo in front of this Mother Kali, or during this Navaratri. They are allowed to do that. The question is why they are. Because the understanding is normally perhaps they would want to do that every day, but now they do it once a month or on special dates only. And when they do that also, there is an entire ritual with certain mantras, and if he starts learning the meaning of the mantras, he quickly understands the meaning of the mantra is that since I am doing this act, I do it with full understanding that I will have to take on such bodies later and die as well. I am doing that with that complete understanding. That's the meaning. Now he may not know that initially, but when he knows that, perhaps he may wonder, why the hell am I doing this in the first place? You understood? So the whole system is to regulate people and to give them some allowance as per their need. It's just like a small child who goes to a doctor, the doctor gives him a lollipop to distract him and then gives the injection. Right? So it's not that doctors globally have decided to give lollipops to their patients, but it is just that there are some patients who need that kind of lollipop treatment. So this is why you see differences in the kind of worship that people do worldwide. And this is true not only here, in every religion. There are differences because people are different. And because people are different, they are attracted to different things. For example, there are some people who are attracted to only that worship that inflicts pain on the body. There are people. So for example, you will see in India as well and many other cultures in the world as well, where there is somebody who walks on some burning coal in the name of his God. So you may wonder, why is he doing that? The point is, he likes self-torture. And he feels only in doing that he has done something. He feels like that. The individual itself is like that. Because normally himself he is accustomed to some kind of self-torture. So this looks attractive. So there are people who whip themselves in the name of God. There are people who scratch themselves, do all kinds of things. So the question is it necessary to do that for everyone? Well, it just depends on who you are. If that's the stuff that you're made of, then perhaps that seems very attractive to such an individual. And that's what we are actually looking at here when we say that there are the 6 set of Puranas. So for example, that's for tamas. Now in Rajas means what? Passion. So in passion, a person wants things. He wants so many things. So you will see, for example, in the Indian system in general and even world over, there are all kinds of prayers and rituals offered to get many things. Ayur Dehi, Dhanam Dehi, Vidya Dehi. There's a whole list actually. That means you go to God to get things. Because that's what you need. You want things. You want to have a great time. So that kind of says that, okay, if you want, maybe try this out. So it's basically your own nature based on which you are attracted to some kind of a ritual or a worship. This is a general understanding as to why. Yeah. 5 वाजतापर्यंत आहे माझ्या लेक्चर. 5 वाजता या तुम्ही. Yeah, this is the reason why there are these stark differences in the way people approach, even that so-called one God, because people are different and they need different stimuli or difference in how they would actually like to do it. Okay, so this part we have already looked at. Now the main session today is actually yoga, which I wish to deal with, and we will go pretty slow with this because I have a lot of time and I'm not really I don't have voluminous material to cover today. So, right. So we start with what is yoga. So first thing is we want to remove some misconceptions about it. So just like for example, this is actually a book, a cover page called Doga, Yoga for Dogs. Yeah, because so people have in the West. So please remember, today yoga is a multi-billion dollar business, and interestingly, India has only 5% of the yoga business share, because in that also we are very poor. There are all these Europeans and Americans. I know several yoga institutes in America, for example, they charge you, you'll not believe, $10,000 to teach you yoga for 30-40 days. And they are really good at it. Now, how have they learnt it? If you carefully observe, these guys have come in the last 30-40 years to places like Rishikesh, Haridwar, where there are several yogis of India who actually teach them free. Because in the Indian system, you teach free. So these yogis in India teach them free and they send them off. And they make good money, really solid money. Much more than what our engineers and IT professionals make by hard work. They teach you, and you stay fit as well. You're ekdam pakka fit. So I've seen many such Europeans and Americans. At least thanks to the Modi government 2 years back, they decided to, Modi kind of celebrate an International Yoga Day, I think on June 21st or something. At least that was an Indian initiative. Otherwise it was not thing. But the thing is, in general, yoga means people understand to be something like this. Yoga means, immediately a picture of someone like Ramdev Baba comes where, you're just standing and standing on your head or Shirsasana or taken your entire belly inside and, kind of you're fit, that kind of a thing. So there is also yoga for dogs, because please remember, in America, dogs are extremely important. Love me, love my dog. It's a British saying. So there's also something called as kitty yoga, where there are cats who do. Yeah. So the question is this yoga? So is yoga equal to exercise? That's the first question that I wish to ask, and I wish to say that no, it's not. It's something much more than that. So where does this exercise come in this yoga? All that we will see today. Why it comes, all that stuff. So when we think of yoga, generally all this comes, asana and meditation. So people are doing, various kind of stunts. Like if someone tells you that I'm going for a yoga class every Sunday morning, then you would picture something like this. That perhaps he's going somewhere on Sunday morning and standing on his head. Right? So the definition of yoga is what? So yoga comes from this Sanskrit word called as yuj, which means to join or to connect. Connection is very important, right? Nowadays, mobile connection, internet connectivity, you connected to the tower. So yoga actually means to join or connect. Now the question is, connect what to what? When you say connect, there are two entities to be connected, right? Yeah. So the definition of yoga is to connect soul with God. That's actually the purpose. Now how is that achieved? What is the role of asana in yoga? All that we will try to summarize today in the next 1.5 hours. Yeah. So let's go more into a detailed definition of the word yoga. So this is actually the Sanskrit, right from the sutras, where yoga is defined as yoga chitta vritti nirodha. That means something that deals with the fluctuations of the mind. So basically the whole idea is the mind is constantly, shifting from one thought to another very quickly and rapidly. And in order to calm it down and in order to make the mind more focused is also a very important goal of yoga. So that's why one definition of yoga is chitta vritti nirodha. Something that deals with the fluctuation of mind. And how does it achieve that? It achieves that by these twin processes of practice and detachment. Abhyasa and vairagya. That means by practicing a yoga system and also by being detached. Now what do you mean by these two things? This is actually what we are going to see today. We'll elaborate on this. What kind of practice the yoga talks of. The different types of yoga that you hear of. We will see all that today. Okay, where the whole idea is that the mind is understood as a river between two banks, and the two banks is, one bank is of attachment and one of aversion. You understand these two terms? Raga, dvesha. Attachment, aversion. Attachment means you want to enjoy, and then you want to give up. So basically, these are the two banks of attachment and aversion. That means, like if you see, that's why most people, like let's take one simple topic, because that's one thing that I'm going to deal with a lot today, relationships. People like to get attached in certain relationships, and then very quickly they like to break away the relationships as well. Because these are two sides of the coin. You get attached and then you become averse. You become attached, you become averse. Sustaining something is very difficult. Because sustaining something from the yoga terminology needs a lot of sattva. To really sustain a relationship, to sustain a marriage, to sustain anything, you need sattvikta. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult for sustaining. So anyway, so the mind is considered as reverse. So to channelize the mind is the purpose of yoga. So now let's go into it more. Yeah, so basically, there are these various yoga systems that people generally hear of, and which is what I want to give a summary of from the Yoga Shastra. So one is, for example, Karma Yoga. Everyone hears of something called as Karma Yoga. Now what that is, we will try to see today briefly. There's something called as Jnana Yoga or Dhyana Ashtanga Yoga, Bhakti Yoga. So there are these different types of yoga systems, and there are gurus of teachers of each of these yoga systems. So let's see all these in some detail. Yeah, so basically, I'll come back to this slide a little later. So the whole point here is the purpose of the yoga system is to uplift one. That's the basic philosophy, thought process. That is to take one above in the mode ladder. That means if somebody is in tamas, gradually bring him to rajas, at least by the end of this life. Or if he's in rajas, take him to sattva, so on. So that's actually seen as the purpose in some way, because that also helps in taking care of the mind and all that stuff. So that's how the yoga siddhanta is. So the whole point is to regulate actions, because generally without rules, one sinks. So this is a very interesting thing that what I put up here. Without rules, one sinks, as in without any discipline in life, the automatic channel is to just go down. That's how the world is in general. You just automatically flow with like a water. It comes down only, it doesn't go up normally. Unless you have a pump or you do something extra effort. It's just going to go down. So similarly, under normal state, a person finds it very easy to come down, because as the Yoga Sutras say, happiness in rajas is considered to be nectar in the beginning and poison in the end. So it's something immediately very nice, but it becomes deadly later. Whereas in sattva, the happiness in sattva is characterized as poison in the beginning and nectar in the end. And happiness in tamas is characterized as poison in the beginning and poison in the end. So the whole point is, people, so for some reason, it's very easy to just sink down. So if you carefully observe also the European and the first world countries, by first world I mean America, North America, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, etc. If you see in parameters of like I'll tell you a simple example. Why is it that even today in America, if you go in American universities, there are so many Indian and Chinese kids? You know that? I mean, if you go to any American company like Microsoft, Google, so many, I mean almost 60-70% are Indian and Chinese kids only. The American kids are extremely less. Even in all, there are so many competitions. Like there was one spell bee competition. For the last 7-8 years only Indian kids are winning there. And in fact, it became a little controversial thing also there. They were saying, why our people are not winning English spelling competition? Why Indian guys are coming and beating? So if you see very carefully, it's a very simple thing. That when you don't have much of self-discipline and rule, you automatically go down. Somehow, in some way, Indian and Chinese still tend to be a little more disciplined and hardworking. At least at this point. At least those who reach there, they work really hard to get. After going there, they do what they want. But at least to get there, they really sweat it out. And in order to achieve success, even in your professional life, you need rules and discipline. Otherwise, nobody achieves actually. Right? So, but that's generally not the case in today's first world culture. The people who actually grow up there, they don't really emphasize on that. So for example, you will see it very common that in schools itself, it's almost compulsory by the 7th, 8th standard. They give detailed understanding of contraceptives, distribute them in their schools. So do such things, and they basically tell people that, just do what you want. So basically, automatically, everybody just does what he wants in that way of, coming down in the ladder of the moods. And that's what you actually see in such societies primarily, which is also related to why these people don't really go so much ahead in their careers also, which is also a fact actually, if you carefully observe. Anyway, so the thing is, the whole idea is there are rules. And the rules are different for different people. That's another interesting thing in the yoga paddhati or thought process. So for example, a rule for a Shudra, the rule for the Vaishya, Kshatriya, and the rule for the Brahmana is different. Now why is it like that? It is like that because you are different. Can you just close the door, please? Just pull it and latch it up. Because when a person is different, the rule is different. So I'll give you some modern examples as well, which will make a lot of sense to you. Like for example, a Kshatriya, one who is a military man, a fighter. Traditionally, for example, the Yoga Sutras talks say that, or the general understanding in India is that a Kshatriya, somebody who is actually, ready to fight, because he has to experience bloodshed and all that stuff, he is, for example, permitted to hunt animals in the forest. At least those days, there were a lot of animals still. Nowadays, of course, we have finished the animals as well. But since there were a lot of wild animals, they were allowed to do that. Now, why they were allowed to? That's violence, right? If you see in one way. But why is that violence allowed? For that guy, violence is allowed because he has to actually face real violence in the world. Unless he's used to blood and violence, he will get scared of fighting. You need guts, right? Like we see the Indian army also, which did that surgical strike, going into the neighboring country and doing all that. It requires a lot of guts actually. If you're a scared and coward kind of person, you will not go. You'll run away. You'll say, "Mere ko ghar jana hai baba. Nahi jamega ye sab." Right? You get scared. So you can't be scared. So in order to ensure that you're really fit and you have that courage, bloodshed was important for such a person. For him, a rule was different. But that rule doesn't apply to somebody who is just sitting and teaching or doing some other work. Because he doesn't have to kill unnecessarily. That other fellow needs to, because he has to work. Like even in today's world, it's like that. Like if you know, in our Kashmir today, the army that sits there, there are laws to protect the army men. For example, when an army man takes his gun and sometimes, they shoot people. They shoot some terrorist or something. And sometimes 2-3 innocent people also get killed in such. It happens. Are they punished for that? No, they are not. Because there are special government rules that actually protect the army. Because they say that when we are fighting in such places, it is but natural that many innocent people will also die in our firing. We can't help it. If you say we should not do it, we don't want to sit here only. So, there is an army act that allows them, gives them what is called as immunity. You understood? From being prosecuted for any mistake that happens in their duty. So many times it happens that they kill somebody and then later it is said that he was not terrorist only, he was a normal guy. But then they say sorry. it just happened. It happens. So a rule for him is different. But for me and you, if we take a licensed rifle and go to Kashmir and we just knock off somebody, because we have a debate with him over the auto bill, we'll be in jail. That doesn't apply to you. That rule is not for you. That's only for him. Because he's in a different position. So this is the whole idea behind why people had different set of rules in sense of, the yogic ladder. And concessions. I'm just going back to the same point. Why certain concessions are for some people and not for others? Because it just depends on what your work is. If you really need that concession, if you need it, right? So, I was also once telling you, right? There are so many of our army people who sit in Siachen Glacier. So it's a whole different thing there. So if somebody has to actually sit there, the kind of food that he has to eat, even to survive over there, is different than somebody who's sitting down here. So you can't equate the two in so many ways. Okay, so moving ahead. So there are basically these 4 kinds of yoga systems, and we'll elaborate briefly about each of them, just maybe 15 minutes on each yoga system to understand what actually they're trying to talk of. So the 4 kinds of yoga are, karma, jnana, dhyana and bhakti, and the whole point is, it depends on the connection medium. So as I told you, yoga means a connection, and the question is, what are you connecting? So you may connect your body, you may connect your mind, you may connect your intelligence, you connect the soul. So it just depends on what do you want to connect. So that's how the different yogas are spoken of. So we will go into each of them and speak in some detail. So now I'll start with karma yoga, which in fact I'm going to elaborate for a brief amount of time. But so one thing I wish to say about this in connection with what we actually did yesterday. So if you remember yesterday when I spoke on this term called karma, I basically mentioned that there are 3 types of it. One is you generate some positivity in your account, kind of by doing good to people, etc. One is where you earn negative credits, right? And I think this is something where we had a lot of questions at the end as well. So I wish to just clarify that point once again. Many students were asking yesterday as well that who decides what's good, what's bad. So it's a very simple thing actually. So that's why I spoke, the karma philosophy also talks in terms of values. So there are certain, so first of all, the understanding is that all this is applicable only to humans. Okay, so that means, for example, if a tiger kills someone, there is no bad karma for the tiger. No, the tiger is not born, he's born with that instinct to kill. The tiger, if he sees anyone, he will kill only. It's not wrong on his part. He's not been, but a human is different. When you go and kill a tiger, that's totally different thing. You know what it means to kill someone. Forget religion, forget God, forget everything else for the time being. So there was one student who was just talking to me, who decides what's correct, what's wrong. I was saying to him that why, for example, it is in all cultures that if I shake hands with you, it's considered polite, and if I slap you, it's considered bad. Why isn't the other way? That if I slap you, that's a polite way of greeting, and if I shake hand, that's considered very negative. Because it's a very simple fact that in one place you're extending courtesy, you're extending politeness, you're extending love, and in the other case you're extending cruelty. It's a very simple thing, as simple as that. So that's why the karma talks in terms of qualities. And anything that supports, anything that is against. And that also situation based. It depends which situation. So truthfulness, though it's a great quality, several times perhaps it's not great to be truthful. Like we all know a simple example. Suppose if a old man is dying, and as he's dying you get the news that his son met with an accident. Are you going to tell that to that fellow? He's asking, how is my son doing? You say, he's great, don't worry now. We don't tell him that, oh, your son also met with an accident, he may die before you. That's the truth, right? He asks now, how is my son doing? Why don't you tell the truth? But that truth is not what he's supposed to hear at that time. So the qualities are seen in essence and not in an external sense, in sense of, whether we just did it that way. And how do you understand that? The human intelligence is pre-programmed actually. I mean, it has that basic common sense to distinguish everybody in the world, whether he's an atheist or a theist or whatever he is. Even an atheist sometimes can avoid a lot of bad karma in general. He may not believe in a God, but he may be karmically very good because he may not do negative activities. On the other hand, someone who claims to be a theist may actually do a lot of negative work in the world. Are you getting my point? So this is something that's very apparent to the human intelligence. Like if I'm a doctor, I know that I'm supposed to serve my patients faithfully and not cheat them. No, I don't have to have education in theology for that. I know that by myself, that is how I'm supposed to do. But if I've decided to be a crook, then that's a different thing. So then I pay the price. That's a negative karma. That's a negative environment. So please remember, karma and theism are two different topics. So somebody who just doesn't believe in a God, in the karma theory, can have a lot of positive karma in his account, and the other way is also possible. Somebody who apparently externally makes a big show of religion, but he's actually doing a lot of criminal activities underneath. It's possible. Ideally, it should not be, but the world is like that. Okay, that's why many people say also that Indian philosophy is the only philosophy which allows even atheists to coexist in their system. So, for example, there's a very famous philosopher in the 60s called Charwak, a very famous person. Written a lot of books on atheism. That's what he believed in, right? But he was allowed to coexist. It's not that he's going to be shot dead, or there's no concept that you have to kill someone, because that's considered fundamentally bad karma. So you can't do that. Okay, so the whole system in India is, if you have a problem with somebody's philosophy, argue it out. You can't raise weapon on that. That's the system. Yeah, so basically I spoke about these two. The third thing which I did not speak about is what we are actually covering today, is what we call as akarma. So akarma by definition basically means no karma. That means I do something where I get out of the cycle of karma. So this is basically oriented towards breaking that cycle so that there is neither positive nor negative reaction. So basically I go towards the path of liberation, or what they call as moksha. So that's how this akarma thing is seen. So we will elaborate briefly one by one how these things achieve it. So in karma yoga, the senses are the medium. That means it's via the body that one does akarma. So how does one do that? So in the karma yoga system, it's very clear that so another way we understand yoga or a yogi is by understanding what is the opposite of yogi, which will actually sometimes make it clear. So the opposite of yogi is considered this word as bhogi. Bhogi means someone who is really interested only in self-enjoyment. That means for whom only he is the center and he is here just for himself. Whereas the principle of yoga starts from the principle of sacrifice. That means I am not here for myself. I am here to do for someone else. And why am I doing for someone else? Again, I am doing for someone else in a spirit of sacrifice. Whether that person likes it or... So the spirit of sacrifice is the essential quality in yoga, where you don't do something just for yourself. You do something for others. That others could be different circles. It could be family, it could be society, it could be country, it could be the universe, it could be animals, it could be, there are different people who wish to extend their life for the sake of someone else completely. Give their life for somebody else in some way. So that's actually the beginning of understanding of yoga. You understood? And in karma yoga, the understanding is that I will use my senses to do that. And because I use my senses, I use it in the external world to sacrifice myself, for the sake of others in general. And so how does this become a karma? This becomes a karma because now whatever actions you are doing, you never did it primarily just to, make yourself a big person in that sense. Primarily. Your main goal was always to do it for others. So that's why, this term is there. Sorry, I just went down. This term, so this karma yoga has two varieties, flavors. One is called sakama and one is called nishkama. So nishkama basically means, nishkama means not for myself. I do it for others. Sakama means I do it for myself also, but still I have a spirit of sacrifice. So that's like the first step. And then one goes to the next step. So these are again some steps in it. Right? So the understanding is that I do it as a sacrifice. So I just want to take one domain of activity and show how one may do karma yoga in it. There are so many domains you could see. But for some specific reason, I have chosen this domain of relationships. Because relationships again is a very interesting and important thing in the world. And especially in today's world, everybody has, like on Facebook, I have 476 friends and, I have so many followers on each of the social media. So people actually like relationships. So that's why I just chose relationships as a theme to show how karma yoga applies on that. So karma yoga applies not only to relationships, it applies to work, it applies to everything that you do in life. But I have just taken as an example to show in the domain of relationships how karma yoga functions. So there are basically in the domain of relationships, there are 4 kinds of relationships the Mahabharata speaks of, with examples as to how people did. So there is what is called as shoshan or exploitation, there is spardha or competition, there is sahakar or cooperation, and there is samarpan or dedication. So basically, these are succeedingly higher and higher flavors of relationship. That means how you behave in a relationship. So the understanding is that the first one which I have written here is the primarily in tamas, where my relationship, the quality of the relationship is in tamas because it's exploitation. The quality of relationship is rajas because it's competition. The quality of relationship is sattva because it's cooperation. And here the quality of relationship is in akarma because it's dedication. It's not primarily for me. It's just, a life of dedication. So it's a very simple example, but I could take karma yoga and take any feature in the world, whether it is, as I told you, whether it is the way people earn money, the way you work, the way you kind of eat food, the way you give charity. Any aspect of life you could take, and you could again categorize in these 4 ways. In tamas how it is, in rajas how it would be, in sattva how it would be, and in a yogic mood how it would be. So from a karma yoga perspective, relationship in some. So we'll just briefly talk on these, and you will obviously understand it because it's not very difficult at all. Okay, so the lowest category of relationship in the tamas category is called as shoshan, which is basically exploitation. And exploitative relationships again are of 2 types, unconscious and conscious. Anybody can give me a very quick example of unconscious exploitation or conscious exploitation? I mean, these are some very simple concepts that you could, first bench. Good.
Suppose one person is what we call as suppose one person drink alcohol and he do exploitation. It is unconscious exploitation.
He does it?
Unconscious exploitation.
No, if he's drinking alcohol and beating up his wife?
Yeah.
How is that unconscious? It's conscious, right? I know I'm doing that. Unconscious is not that. Yeah, last bench. Okay, just say aloud. It's fine. Yeah. Good. Yeah, that's exploitation. The best example is the Mahabharata itself. Duryodhana was exploiting his father Dhritarashtra all his life. Right? He was exploiting his father basically. He was exploiting Bhishma, his grandfather as well. He made him fight for his own selfish cause. That's all exploitation. But that's conscious. I want unconscious example. Unconscious, can anybody give me a good example for unconscious exploitation? Without knowing, you exploit the other person. I'll give an example quickly. I like to give an example from parent to child because anyway it is possible. Sometimes, for example, I see this always. Or recently I saw this that, in Kota in India, there is a place called Kota where these kids come to study for IIT JEE. And there was one girl who recently committed suicide. I saw her letter actually. That letter was published by the collector of that place. It was a very moving letter. It brings tears to you. That girl says basically that how I was just not interested in this. She writes it to her mother, saying that, my dear mother, with all good intention you pushed me into it. But I am just not for this. I was just not interested in this whole damn thing to become an engineer from IIT. But since you forced me to that, I realized that I am unable to live with the stress of it. And at the same time, I just don't want to disappoint you by not achieving what you want me to achieve. Hence, I decided to quit my life. Very beautifully handwritten letter. She's written a 5-page letter, this girl, 17-year-old kid, before she just hung herself or did something like that. So it's unconscious exploitation. Where, for example, as a parent, with all good intention, I make my child do something which is not fit for, which is not his interest. I'm exploiting the child actually, but I just don't know that I am. I'm thinking that I'm doing great for that person. So like this you can think of in any domain of relationship. I can unconsciously exploit. Right? A spouse could unconsciously exploit the spouse by so many ways. You can just think practically. So many examples. I mean, that will be some example of what I would ask in your exam, for example. You can think about it. So unconscious exploitation means I don't have that intention, but I do it nevertheless. But the effect is the same. Okay, because it's tamas. You're really not dealing with the person properly. So the result is disastrous. And that's what we see when there is exploitation. Conscious exploitation, very clear. There are unlimited examples. I mean, the best global examples of conscious, all this French Revolution. You should read the story of French Revolution. What an amazing story. How the people, went against this whole feudal system in France and crushed it down. Of course, they went to the other extreme, killing all the knights and the lords and just total disaster. So that's what conscious exploiting. You know that you're doing it and then you do. Right? So of course in India also we see a lot of this conscious exploitation in the name of love. Like so often you hear of honor killings and throwing acid on the woman's face. All this stuff that you hear in our country right now. It's all exploitation only. There's no real love or there is no real relationship. It's completely exploitative. But that's what it is. Right? Conscious exploitation. Yeah. So you could exploit a superior as well. It's not that only inferior is exploited, or you could exploit an inferior. So many times in jobs also there is a lot of exploitation, which is many times conscious, sometimes unconscious, but people exploit subordinates like anything in work culture in the world. Right? So this is all exploitation. And ultimately it creates a very, so why it is called tamas is because it creates a feeling of destruction. You just, at the end of that, in the end of that relationship, you just want to destroy. Either you want to destroy yourself, you want to destroy the other person, you want to do something crazy. So that's why it's called as tamas. Yeah, so if you go ahead in the relationship domain, you have spardha or competition. So here the relationship is entirely competitive. Competitive as in, the whole thing is, so basically this happens between equals. So it could happen between friends, it could happen between, a couple, a family, husband and wife, where, they are too much in competition. So many times the competition could be for money, it could be, I'll just give an example for this, one example, maybe two. Okay, I'll start with this example maybe. I heard of this very interesting example. I read this in the newspaper actually. There were two friends, 16-year-old, two friends in Bombay, real story. Last year it came. So both were preparing for HSC exam, like we all did. Perhaps your batch only he was. So they were good friends, but at the same time they had a competition as to, who will get more marks. So believe it or not, for during that CET exam or something, this one friend, what he did, he had his other friend kidnapped. Yeah, he made his friends to kidnap him and lock him in some house so that he will not give exam, so that he will go ahead. I mean, very silly, but kind of a very strange example of, and he said also, they are my best friend, but then somehow, I wanted to get more marks than him, and I thought this is the safest way to get more marks than him, because if I keep him locked during the exam, he will not give exam only, so by definition I have got more marks. And anyway, he was a 17-year-old kid, so on minor in India, you don't do any action as well. You just advise that person and send him home, right? So, a simple example of spardha. Even in a husband and wife, sometimes that thing is there, So I personally, for example, do a lot of counseling for families as well in terms of marital conflict. So I have several examples which I've seen live, but I'll just say one of them. So this is one interesting case I was dealing with recently. He happened to be my relative itself. So this young man and woman, they had a so-called love since 5th standard in school. So some amazing category of love. They got married. After 2 years, they were in the process of filing for a divorce. So they had just come to me. So I was just trying to help them out and see whether they could avoid that. So when I tried to understand what went wrong, the whole problem was that the woman had a night job. She would go at night, and the man had a day job. So after 2 years, the man suggested to his wife that, why don't you also take a day job? Because I'm not getting night job. So you take a day job, so at least night we'll be together. Something husband-wife means. Otherwise we meet only on the weekend, we say hi to each other. So the woman said, this job of mine is giving me a very good salary equal to you. If I take another job in day job, I may not get like that. So she said that I will rather quit the marriage only. We'll just go for divorce. So this was actually the reason. So even we tried to tell this lady a lot that, do you really want to quit just for this? You loved him so much for 15 years or whatever, So she said, no, that I'm convinced of this. I cannot, because the money that I'm getting here is much more important than the relationship. So she decided to quit. So you see that, where the whole thing is based on competition in external resources. It could be money, it could be possessions, it could be anything. But that's basically what spardha looks like. Intense competition because of rajas. Competition, right? You want to go ahead. So, so that's most important. Yeah, so we just gradually are taking ahead. So the third level of relationship, for example, which is sattvic, is considered sahakar. Sahakar in Sanskrit basically means cooperation. That means you cooperate with each other, which is considered the minimum requirement of a society, where you actually learn to cooperate and live with people. You understood? Because otherwise, if you're not ready to cooperate and live, it's very difficult to sustain a relationship. I had a very interesting thing recently, encounter. That one of our professors in our com department, he had gone to Dublin, Ireland to present a paper. Like our professors go to present some research papers in various places. So he had gone there, Ireland. So anyway, so there was a host of that entire conference. So after the conference was over, he was just talking to a professor. So he was asking, it was a lady, so she was just asking my friend, how long you have been married? Just kind of a casual question. So a prof said that married for 30 years, he's a 55-year-old gentleman. So she asked, to the same woman? He said, yeah. She said, I am married 4 times always, my 4th husband running currently. So I'm surprised that 30 years you sustained the relationship. So this fellow said, nothing great about it. My parents are still married for 55 years to the same woman and man. So she said, oh really? Huh? Yeah, that's how it is. Later we came back and we tried to do some research and find out. So we understood that in Britain and some countries over there, the divorce rate is 90%. So it's such a phenomenal rate of divorce, and now it has come down a little bit. The reason why it came down a little bit in the recent last few years is because of live-in relation, where there is no sign only of marriage. So there is no count or statistics of divorce, because only when you get married then there is divorce, right? Otherwise there's no statistical record to understand what is the percentage. तो अभी percentage थोड़ा 65-70 हो गया है recently, but 2 years back it was 90 plus. So basically, so primarily what happens is there's no cooperation. There's no concept of cooperation, because why should we cooperate? So the concept of sacrifice. So again, see, this is how, in a way, yoga is related to theism. Though I told you, so the reason is very simple. So because if you look at European history as well, were they always like this? Absolutely not. 100 years back, were they like this? No, they weren't this bad. They weren't. The society was not like this. So why the society was not like this 100 years back? You see the history of Europe, even 100-200 years back, their entire European society was still connected a lot to the Christian, Judo, the Jewish culture and faith. Whereas now it's not like that. It's like, it's complete don't care. It's like free for all, after the 1960s so-called liberalized understanding of how you live life. So everything is okay. So that's what you see when everything is okay. What happens? So the whole question is, why should one cooperate simply with somebody? Why to cooperate? Why should I adjust with somebody fundamentally? Why should I sacrifice if I have no higher goal in life? So I'll just bother about what is comfortable to me. And if everybody thinks of what is comfortable for that person, how can 2-3 people live together under one roof? It's impossible. You can't live, because you have to cooperate. Without that, it's not possible. So that's what happens eventually. Of course, I'm not saying that everybody in Europe or America is like that. There are many fantastic communities as well. So since I do a lot of sociological study, I came across this one community in America called the Amish community. They're actually Christians, and the way they live life is just amazing. So their understanding is they live life completely cut off from the mainstream American society, and they have their own schooling system for their kids, everything extremely family oriented. If you see their families, they will have like 5-7 kids and big families, and they'll have their own business, they'll do their own thing. Then at the age of 16, they will send their boy or girl compulsorily 2 years to deal with the world outside. And their success rate is 85%. 85% of their kids come back. They say that we saw the world, we are happy to come back and be in such a community. Sort of free choice, they come back and live. So they're a very strong Christian community, and they stay like that. In an extremely, the cooperation is just amazing, out of the world. So there are some small oases of examples in the West as well. But by and large, the society is broke because of whatever, values they have decided to take. So cooperation doesn't exist. So, but it's a fact that if you have to live together with people, cooperation is mandatory. Otherwise, you have to accept the reality that we don't want to live. So then that's fine. Right? So that's beginning of sustainable relationship. It's a bargain. So cooperation basically means what? So cooperation basically means two parties have to live together. So we tell them, okay, you have to sacrifice something, even you have to sacrifice something. Unless you do that, you can't actually live. Right? But the negative thing about cooperation, the pitfall of cooperation is that at one point a person starts feeling other person is not cooperating only. How long should I only keep cooperating and sacrificing? So basically, there is some kind of self-interest that ultimately comes over there, because of which it's not considered the highest category. Whereas the highest category relation is called samarpan, or dedication. So this dedication is actually what comes in the akarma category, because here you don't do it for yourself. And when you don't do something for yourself, you're free from the result of that action. That's the theory of yoga. I repeat the point again. When you do something for yourself, you have to take the result. You have to take the environment. But when you have decided that I'm going to live for others primarily, then the reaction also doesn't come to you, because in your system you are very clear that I'm not living just for a selfish sake. I'm going to dedicate. Right? So because you're dedicating, your results, you're freed from the result. So that's the concept behind this karma yoga. So this is where karma yoga starts to act. And this is an example of how karma yoga could act in the domain of relationships, where you decide to act in that particular way of dedication. So that's what nishkama karma yoga means. The definition of that is, I will do my duty in an efficient way. Because it's my duty, I need to perform my role in any situation. Because I want to do that. So a person could do that in any domain. You may be a businessman, you may be a teacher, you may be whatever. But I'm going to do my job perfectly because I want to dedicate. That's it. Right? So many times, for example, people ask me also as a teacher that, okay, you're teaching kids, but then if someone, if sometimes there are many students nowadays who are just not interested only, who come to class, like especially in higher classes, I realize that in third year engineering, final year engineering, we are teaching group of students and many students are just not interested in engineering. So as a teacher, you're not supposed to lose hope. We just continue doing our best just because that's the best thing to do. That's what I did decide to dedicate my cause for. You understood? So the whole concept here is, I will do it irrespective of anything coming from the opposite side. Right? So if the other person doesn't give anything, I will continue to dedicate. And if you carefully observe, cultures in the Asian countries or even in the European countries were actually based on dedication only, where people would dedicate for the cause of, at least for the cause of their family, if not for something else. But today it's increasingly not like that. Like, I'll give you some interesting sociological ideas for you to, chew your thought process on. Just like, it's a very common thing in India, you will see, or in many countries, not only in many countries, where the parents are working very hard just so that they can get some money and save for their child's education. They do that actually. Because they feel that I'm not here just to earn money for myself. It is actually for someone else. So at least they do that for the family. That's like the first step in it. Ideally, you're supposed to go beyond that, but at least that's a first step. At least that much they do. Like for example, when you go to America or Europe, which many of you can go and you can find out yourself also, even in colleges, there is, like for example here, I'm pretty sure that almost 99% of all of you who come here to study, you are not paying your fees. Either your parents are paying, or some relative is paying, or the government is paying. But at least you are not paying. But if you actually go to the Western world today, it's not like that. People pay their own fees. They are on their own after 16, 17. That's a fact. By and large, they are on their own. They have to take student loans and study. That's it. Because the parents and all, at a particular age, they say that now we are not going to take care of you. On Mother's Day, Father's Day, you come and greet us. That's it. You're on your own only. Yeah, you're on your own. Everybody is on their own. That's why you will see also, Europeans, Americans, for example, many of them as tourists all over the world. They're traveling everywhere because the whole culture is of spending. Do you know one thing, that the average money that an Indian has today in terms of his personal savings is more than what an average American has in his savings? Because in their understanding, there is no such concept only today. Because the whole understanding is consumer based, where the government and the media has told everybody to spend money. Right? So, in fact, I'll just make this amusing incident and then I'll go ahead. President George Bush, in 2001, when the 9/11 incident happened and the Twin Towers came crashing down, believe it or not, in his televised message to America, what did he actually, a president shares his message with the Americans, right? With the countrymen. What did he say actually? He said that, continue your shopping. This was you can look up that. The reason is, he felt fearful that the economy will go down because of this crash. Because people become very thoughtful and afraid about what will happen to their lives and they stop spending money. How will the economy go? So one of the fundamental messages was that just continue to shop and do what you're doing. Just continue the consumer idea of spending money. Because the whole economy there is based on consumerism. You know that, right? The more you spend money, the more money comes into the market, and that's how the whole economy grows. If people save, that's not considered great. You understood? Yeah, but in these cultures over here, in these societies, you see people saving money because primarily they feel that I have to live for another person. So I'm not just living for myself. So that's the beginning of dedication. That's the first step at least, where you understand that you do something for someone else. But then later it is supposed to expand. That's what Karma Yoga expects you to do. That means just don't live for yourself. Like I was making this point. That's why world over, primarily if you see tourists, they are Europeans and Americans in most places. Their idea is that, they spend all their money by the time of their death. It's not that they leave a huge sum for their children to inherit. That custom is by and large non-existent. Because the whole understanding is that I live for myself to enjoy. And that also with child, because you were married several times already. So it's like you have several stepchildren and, very complicated kind of a relationship mess. So So in Nishkama Karma Yoga or Samarpan, it's different. So exploitation and competition doesn't create a good legacy. Even cooperation is a little suffocating. You understand why it's suffocating? Because it's like you're cooperating just because the other person is doing something, you cooperate. So this cooperation is a little bit, suffocating in that sense. But dedication actually is considered the topmost category in relationships. If you can actually dedicate in a relationship, actually live for another person, for at least to begin with a person, and then a family, then a society, then a country, then entire universe. So that is actually the expansion of consciousness in Karma Yoga, right? That's how it works, and that's how it tends to be a karma, because you don't do it for yourself. So you start slowly giving up those reactions that come to you. So that's the concept here. So the advantages are very clear. So expectation in life is clear. Obsession denial is a problem. So these are two sides of the pendulum. I am either too obsessed or I deny. So but Nishkama is the middle state, where you are neither too obsessed with any situation nor are you denying that relationship. So that's why in the Indian system, the Sanskrit incidentally tends to be a language where you can find words for most English words. Like for any word you have in modern times, you have a word in Sanskrit. There are some words you don't get words actually. Like one such word is divorce. You don't have a word in Sanskrit for that. It's very difficult to get. You will not find it because the culture doesn't allow you to. You're not permitted. You can't deny a relationship. You can't do that. You have to see how to make it work. That's everyone's individual responsibility. That's how it is seen. Yeah. So anyway, I'll not go more into it. And basically the main advantage is you don't need any counseling, as in you really don't need to go to a psychiatrist or any kind of such person for any counseling. Yeah. I remember seeing this ad, which in one of the freeways in America, United States, this ad was like this. There was a lady who was obviously a psychiatrist who counsels, and there was a patient, a man in front of her with his hand on his head, and the title stated, "Finally someone to whom you can talk to. Call this number for an appointment." Finally someone to whom you can talk to. That means somebody to whom you can open your heart and really talk. And I did some study later to understand that in today's United States, a psychiatrist earns maximum money. More than all these IT engineers and all that. Doctors in general earn more than anybody there. And among doctors also, psychiatrists earn a lot of money. Because there are so many people who need this counseling. Counseling means, you understand, right? Just to open their heart out. So the whole problem is because you've gone through that whole depression of either you exploiting someone or somebody exploiting you, because of which you're frustrated in life. So that's how it is seen as. Right? So that's actually Nishkama. So just one example of Nishkama, and I'll just go ahead. So let's remember, Nishkama does not mean getting exploited. So I'll just take one example and kind of explain this concept of Nishkama before I go ahead to the next system. This example comes from the Mahabharata. So we are going from India and America to the Mahabharata. So in the Mahabharata, there is this very famous story which I'm sure all of you have heard of, where Draupadi is being stripped in the assembly, right? So the whole thing is there's this gambling match, and Yudhishthir finally stakes his wife and loses her, and she's got to the assembly. And the Mahabharata also does not shy away from making it very clear that Draupadi was in her periods at that time. And generally in that culture, even on such an occasion, you are not even supposed to come to such an assembly, and what to speak of being stripped naked at that time. So when Dushasan begins to do his job of stripping her, she initially looks to everyone for help. She's looking for her husband. She has 5 of them. But they say that technically speaking, we have lost you, so we can't do anything. She's looking at Bhishma, Drona. So many big men are sitting. But they are all saying, see, there is some technical problem here. That, the husband put you, you lost, all that stuff. She but she doesn't get any empathy support from anyone. But the highlight of the story, which is what I want to say here, even though her husbands did something which in one sense, if you see, was so ghastly, to put her to undergo this ordeal, of, kind of losing all this. I mean, literally being shamed like this in front of public. But still, she never gives up her husbands. She doesn't do that. Now, please remember, it is not that she does not object to what went wrong. In fact, if you see the story, when they go to the forest, because that was the deal later, that 13 years they have to spend in the forest. When they go to the forest, she's repeatedly telling her husbands, what nonsense, you all are eunuchs, sitting like that and you didn't do anything. I mean, she's really firing them left, right. She's chastising them. But at the same time, she also understands that, okay, for whatever reason, these people were stuck in something, but I cannot just give up this relationship. I cannot give up anything. In fact, she even continues to address Dhritarashtra as her father-in-law, which is actually very difficult for a woman to do after having seen that your so-called father-in-law was sitting and watching all this fun. I mean, he was blind, but still he was sitting and presiding over the fun, without doing anything. You understood? It's a very classic example of someone who refuses to quit because she doesn't cut her relationship with anyone after that event. Even though something so terrible has happened, she's objecting. She says that because as a queen, she was supposed to be, there was a particular hairstyle she had to adopt by tying it up and wearing a crown and all that stuff. She said, I will do none of that till I get the blood of that Dushasan on my hair. So she makes it very clear and she keeps her hair in front for 13 years to tell her husbands that whenever you see this hair, you need to remember that incident and you have to get the blood from his chest, which is going to wash this hair, and only then I'm going to tie it. Because obviously she's a kshatrani. A kshatrani is one who has that, passion and will not simply be so-called humble, will not tolerate that. But the point is, even though she expresses her anger, she understands the reality of life, that she has to continue with whatever. Quitting is never an option. That's the whole point which I want to use this example for. And then things work that way. Ultimately, she gets the blood of Dushasan to do whatever she wanted to take that revenge. She gets her aim fulfilled, but then she bears that whole thing. And even Krishna, when he comes and meets the Pandavas later, he fires her husband, saying that you people are all nuts, to have done this. And he tells Draupadi that had I been there, I would have never allowed this to happen in the first place. To start even this gambling match only I wouldn't have allowed. Unfortunately, I wasn't there. So this is one example of this thing, nishkama. That means you remain dedicated in that relationship, no matter what. And you just see how, to make it work, depending on anything. So that's considered actually a karma. Because you're not doing it just for yourself. You're doing it for so many other people. Like in Draupadi's case, she's doing it for her husband, she's doing it for her sons, she's doing it for a country, she's doing it for everyone. But she decides to do that. So that's a very brief explanation of Karma Yoga. In fact, I actually explained Karma Yoga only from relationship perspective. I could have explained Karma Yoga from several other perspectives, which I'm not doing obviously because of lack of time. But just to give a summary of what Karma Yoga means, where you use your external body in dedication. The second system is called Jnana Yoga. This, for example, is basically more intellectual. This is Jnana, it's knowledge. By knowledge, one liberates. So, I mean, the best example of this I could give is, at least standing in Maharashtra, is, Sant Jnaneshwar. If you see his writings of Jnaneshwari, it's entirely oriented around a very philosophical understanding of the reality by which you become free. So in the Jnana Yoga system, it's not work. There the work is not emphasized. So there you will see mainly someone who's a monk, like Shankara or any of these people who basically talk of detaching themselves from this world by knowledge, and that understanding be awakened in their system. I'm not elaborating on this more, I'm just saying this in one line, but that's the general process of Jnana Yoga, which also gives a person a karma, which gives him freedom from that cycle of karma. There's a third one called Ashtanga Yoga, which is actually called Ashta because it's 8 and 8 parts. And this has 8 parts, and this is actually where what we generally know as yoga come. Step number 3 and step number 4 are the familiar asana pranayam stuff. So basically this thing taken out of Ashtanga Yoga becomes the modern day yoga, basically where. So I'll just briefly speak on this. Ashtanga Yoga basically means, so it has first two steps called Yama Niyama, which I'll elaborate very briefly soon. I have 2 slides on that. But the third and fourth step are Asana and Pranayam. And I think I did mention once upon a time, but I'm mentioning the point again, that Asana is for the body. The whole idea is that the body has to be extremely flexible and lightweight. That means, the heaviness in a body is considered very negative for thought process. That means, by heaviness, I'm not meaning just in terms of weight, overweight, but in the sense of, like we all experience that, feeling light and feeling heavy, as in, just feeling the whole system as a burden, feeling the whole body as a burden. So it starts with, when the body is unfit, generally the body becomes a burden. Unfit as in if there is ache and pain and, different parts are paining and not generally flexible, like not able to do anything, then there is a heaviness that creeps in the body. So the understanding is that in this yoga system, if somebody has to do yoga, he has to be fit physically as well. So that's why asana is emphasized. All kinds of asanas, which will keep your body fit. And this pranayam stuff, believe it or not, it is not for breath, it is for the mind. The understanding in the yoga, Patanjali Yoga Sutras, who talks about this is that the body and mind are connected by breath. That's the understanding. That means the prana or the breathing process connects your body to your mind. And this has actually been seen in several experiments also. For example, when a person is angry, when a person is hyper excited, what is the rate of his breath? And when he's extremely relaxed, how is he breathing? It's different. Unconsciously, it is different. So the whole point is that your mind is accessed, because the whole point is how do you capture your mind? We don't even know where the mind is. In fact, from modern science perspective, we just don't even know whether there is anything called as a mind. All we know there is a brain, that's all. Where is the mind? So we discussed that before, right? So since there is no understanding of this entity called as mind, how do you control it? So the yoga says that it's to breath that you control it. So by proper breathing exercises, you mechanically control your mind as well, which is considered good, which is considered the purpose of yoga. So, but of course nowadays only these two are taken. That's why we have dogga, kitty yoga and all that. Because people think that, well, if it is asana, even my dog can do it. Of course he can. The dog can do asana, but he cannot do other stuff. He cannot understand the whole purpose of yoga, of akarma. That is not possible. But he can just do the exercise part. That's how it is. Yeah, and then there are several other things also. In fact, about these I'm not even going to talk, because these are extremely advanced states of Ashtanga Yoga. I'm going to talk only about the first 2, because 5, 6, 7, 8 are really tough. So for example, this Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana. So, just talking briefly about this pranayam. So breath control, please remember, is something that is, people achieve a lot of success in it, because I do travel to several places and meet different people to understand, what kind of success people achieve in this. It's something amazing. So I personally come across or had direct accounts of, especially, that's why in India this stuff called Kumbh Mela is very famous. The reason why it is famous is because you have all kinds of yogis who come there. And because they all come there, they share their experiences. You see people doing stunts in front of you. Okay, so there are people, so for example, I've come across yogis who, for example, can control their breath for half an hour. So they control not only the breath for half an hour, they control their even pulse beat for half an hour. And all this happens in the Allahabad yoga with all doctors and, with an entire team of people trying to understand whether they're lying or whether they're really saying the truth. Somebody will come and measure, the doctor will say that actually he's not breathing. Oh, there was another guy who was there in the Ujjain Kumbh Mela last year. He demonstrated an ability where he said, I can control my breath for many more hours, for a day or little more. So he made his disciples bury him in a coffin, put him in the ground in front of everyone and, kind of bury the whole place and said that after these many hours, they will open me. So everybody can see that actually I'm not breathing. And he'll go in the ground and then he'll come up. And so people do all this. So basically, there's nothing very magical about it. From a yoga perspective, it is just an advanced practice of breath control, which helps them do what they wish to do. So that's how it is seen, pranayam. These things I'm not going to really talk. I'm just very briefly talking about these 3 entities called Dharana, Dhyana and Samadhi. So these are very advanced stages of yoga where one can focus himself completely for a very prolonged period on the object of his meditation without mind moving to another thought. So that's something, it's very difficult, and it's not something which is of immediate interest. So I'm not really even touching on them. I've just defined them over here. So that's actually what Ashtanga Yoga is. It's much more than asana pranayam. That's basically what I want to say. And that's how it has always been seen in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. So, for example, Yama Niyama. So these are considered the first thing which Patanjali, for example, focuses on. So, for example, for Yama, restraints, Ahimsa Satya Asteya. So basically non-hurting. Again, so I that's why I did cover these as positive human qualities yesterday. But in this yoga system, it's like, it's mandatory. Without this, you can't go ahead. So nobody can say, I'm going to be in Samadhi where I'm a big thief and, kind of a big chore. It's not possible. You can't do that. First, you have to follow these things. The basic stuff, so to speak. And then only you can go to any advanced practice of yoga. So basically there are don'ts and there are do's. And one does that, only then one goes ahead in terms of his asana pranayam. So that's how the Ashtanga Yoga system is, right, seen. So if you remember, this I had already spoken once, the 5 states of mind as per yoga philosophy. I'm just coming once again on it, that Kshipta Muda, that means one was disturbed. And I think I had mentioned this earlier also. I gave these examples of these 5 animals and the senses and how generally the mind tends to be disturbed. I had covered that already in session number 7. Then stupefied means lethargic, etc. And restless means running mind. And now, the goal of Ashtanga Yoga, why I have put this slide here is in order to say that the goal of this third yoga system is to become one-pointed and well-controlled mind. This is actually the goal of the system. To be able to concentrate and the yoga system to maintain the state of concentration for as long as possible, as long as one wishes to. That's actually the goal of this. That's the real goal. And consciousness reflects purity and entirety in the mind of the mind and becomes capable of exploring one's true nature. So basically, the whole idea is that when the mind can sober down and really be very focused, then he can achieve whichever destination he wishes to. Because then the world is, then he's considered to be free in this body. As in, he's not bound by any addictions or negations in this world. He's a completely free man. So yoga sees this as ultimate freedom of the individual, where the mind is freed. And unless the mind is freed, one is said to be completely bound and unfreed as an entity. That's how Ashtanga Yoga sees this whole thing. And that's considered the goal of it. So that's why we spoke in the later 3 stages of Ashtanga Yoga, Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi, which is basically to get this kind of state of the mind. Right? At this point, just before I go ahead, I have one more yoga system to talk on, but I would like to take some questions so that in case if any thought is there, we will take that. Anybody with anything? Is it that you're too tired from 8 o'clock morning college? You're there since 8 o'clock here? Oh, really? Some of you are really looking sleepy. I'm sorry for boring you.
So we say that the goal of life is...
Take it close.
The goal of life is basically to search for happiness.
Yeah.
So, but when we see in real life, a person who is dedicated is not as happy as someone who's living for his or her own self. So how a karma is higher than...
Yeah, good question. Yeah, good question. See, this is because I would say that actually another definition of yogi, I'll come to I'll answer your question very soon, but I'm just making a point connected to what you asked. Another definition of yogi, just like one definition was to connect, one definition was to chitta vritti nirodha, to manage the fluctuations of the mind. Another definition of yogi is he's a connoisseur of pleasure. You understand this word connoisseur? Connoisseur means an expert. Just like, you have these expert connoisseur of tea. So sometimes a tea company has many flavors of tea. So they have this connoisseur. He's like an expert at it. Means if you give him 10 tea cups, he will actually sip a little bit of each and he will tell you which is the best. He'll say this is the best quality. Or there's a connoisseur of music. Sometimes you hear some Shastriya Sangeet And a person who is not a connoisseur, he feels bored to death. He feels, what the hell, they are boring me and putting me to sleep. But the connoisseur who actually knows that art, he appreciates that like anything. He says, come on, what? So nicely he, Bhimsen Joshi or whoever sang that particular tune and alap, it was just amazing. Because he's a connoisseur, he knows that. So this yogi is called as a connoisseur of pleasure. That means someone who understands the high class pleasure. So in fact, much contrary to what we generally see, because our general understanding of happiness is that when I live for myself, then I get maximum pleasure. And I would say that this is certainly externally very true, because right, if I, for example, if I have 1 crore of rupees and if I throw all the 1 crore on myself, first month I go to Switzerland, next month I go to New Zealand, then I go to, Spain, I keep traveling everywhere, kitna maja mila. But on the other hand, if I use my 1 crore and serve humanity, society, people, mere ko maja kidhar mila usme. So from a very external perspective, certainly what you are saying is true. That in dedication there doesn't seem only to be any pleasure. But the pleasure of this is actually only understood to that person who has done that. That pleasure is because that's what the pleasure of tamas and rajas is physically perceivable. The pleasure of sattva is not physically perceivable. It's only mentally understood. It's only experienced. So that's why the person who actually dedicates, he only knows what, of course, so only he knows internally what he's actually going through in that state of, doing something to someone. Whereas this other person, in fact, so the most important thing is you have to genuinely find people who dedicate and talk to them to understand their state of heart. And when one does that, one understands what these people actually undergo. You understood? So, but otherwise it is externally, like if you see the Pandavas and the Kauravas, externally the Kauravas only had a great time. A fantastic time, they looted, they did everything. The Pandavas got the kingdom at the end of their lives actually. In fact, Yudhishthir becomes the king at the age of 90. And he just rules for another 30 odd years and they die by 120 or something. So basically, if you see the Mahabharata story, 90 years of struggle to get a kingdom. And the other party, 90, that's what Duryodhan says when he dies. When he's dying, he's laughing at the Pandavas. He's saying, you people are jokers. I enjoyed my whole life. 90 years I lived. It's the same age they are. I enjoyed my life. I had a good time. Now what are you going to get? Everybody is dead. And by that time, the Pandavas' sons are also dead. What are you going to get? You're getting a kingdom that's utterly broken down. You suffer there. I am happy in this death. So for a person who is focused on the self-centered goal, for him, he sees happiness there only. He doesn't see any happiness only in what this other guy is doing. He feels this is all pain, man. But it's not like that. So the yogi, from the yoga philosophy, and not just philosophy, it's an experience where the yogi perceives pleasure in his act of dedication, at least in the karma yoga perspective. Yeah, makes sense? Any other question? Any other question or comment before I go ahead? Don't worry, I'll not extend before 5 and I'm not going to leave you also before 5. So might as well you ask some question. Anyone with any question? Yeah, give the mic. At least saying that I'll not leave you before 5 made you ask a question. Speak into the mic. Yeah.
So someone dedicating his life to for someone else can be punishment for that. The person to whom he dedicated his life.
No, why it's punishment for that person?
So he might not living his life and completely concentrating on the other's life.
Oh, achha, you are saying punishment for him. No, if somebody is thinking like that, he is not fit to dedicate. He is fit to, see, you cannot artificially sit in these states. It has to be very natural. You have to actually feel that I have to do it. You can't artificially say, मैं dedicate करूँगा, लेकिन तब भी मेरे को क्या मिलेगा, मेरे को क्या, then there is no question only of dedication. I mean, you're still stuck. Your whole consciousness is stuck at a much lower level. You're not at karma yoga. It's only karma. That's it. Then when it's karma, then you have to bother about the positive and negatives. Then you better do something good at least so that you get some good things and avoid as much bad as possible. Then that's a different thing. Yeah. Any other question or comment? Yeah. Speak into the mic.
So what if one person dedicates his life to someone else and according to another person it is a bad karma, like for example, if I have dedicated...
Oh yeah, understood. So please remember, perhaps maybe I forgot to mention that, But obviously in the yoga system, when you say akarma in yoga, the dedication is with understanding what I do. Oh, I'll give a very graphic example only and tell you. Just like for example, I was just speaking to an army man recently. There's one person from the Indian army who has joined our college as some, administrative stuff. He has served 25 years in Kashmir. So I was talking to him yesterday only about his life in Kashmir and what he underwent, how the terrorists come. So he was telling me, because he stayed there for 20-25 years, he knows about, the whole thing. Matlab, kaam hi ho gaya 25 saal. He's now kind of 50-55. So he was telling me that, I was asking, how these people get these terrorists? How do they recruit? He said they have a simple strategy. He said what they do is they go to various homes. There's a group, let's say, they go to various homes and they say that if they have many sons, the 3 sons, they tell them that at least one son you have to give us. Otherwise, we will rape your mother, sister, everything. You understood? So if you give one son from your family, at least your family will be protected. They buy the protection by giving a son off. So, and they know that this fellow will never come home. You understood? Because I was asking this person, if indeed India went there and killed 30-40 terrorists in that surgical strike, why is nobody in Pakistan objecting? Well, somebody should say, na, mera beta mar gaya karke. Nobody is saying anything. They are saying that nobody came, no one died. So how is it that? So he said because these families, once they give their son off, one son off, they know that this fellow is dead only now. Ho gaya. Now if you see carefully, this fellow is dedicated. That's not the dedication we are talking of. So good you asked that question. So in this understanding of relationships and dedication, the dedication is connected to dharma. That means it's connected to sattva. It's connected to actually doing something good in terms of these. That's why that do's and don'ts are there in terms of. So I cannot say I dedicate myself by blowing myself off somewhere and I have dedicated. That is a dedication only. From that fellow's definition, it is dedication. But that's not accepted here as dedication. That's sheer exploitation, right? I mean, even if you see from any perspective, where do you dedicate? You just exploit it. So I may dedicate myself to a gangster, to a thief, to someone who is nefarious. Then if you carefully observe, I am not dedicating because I am exploiting somebody. You are still at the level of exploitation only because you are exploiting, right? You are killing somebody. Where is the dedication? You can't say that I am dedicating for him by killing him. That's what is basically exploitation, right? So that's all it. Yeah. Yeah. Any other quick question before I go ahead? Okay.
सर गीता में श्री कृष्ण ने कहा था कि अर्जुन से तुम सकाम करो, मतलब कर्म भी कर सकते हो और तुम कर्म करके भी मेरे वैकुंठ में आ सकते हो. तो इज दैट फेयर टू डू योर ड्यूटी एंड किल समवन एंड विल गॉड एक्सेप्ट अस?
Okay. He's asking the question about how, though I didn't speak of that, he's brought that whole theme out. He's saying that how come Krishna's talk to Arjuna to fight and kill constitutes yoga. Basically that. So I'll explain because that is also killing, very connected to this. So for that, see, it's like this. The Mahabharata makes it very clear that the people of the country were not at all happy with Duryodhana's rule. That's very clear. It's not that he was a good ruler. They were not happy with him at all. Because when the ruler was like that, the people were just not happy. Because this fellow was sitting only for his selfish benefit. So it's not that he was only harassing the Pandavas and he was very nice as a ruler. No, he wasn't. He was terrible. Since he was terrible, Arjuna, before the Gita being spoken, he's actually thinking, why should I kill? Because his point is, itna saal ho gaya already forest mein baith ke, pura jeevan forest mein baithe hum log. So we will sit some more years in the forest and die. Why kill? Just for country. That's Arjuna's point. Krishna's point is no. Because Krishna's point is, you have to fight this war not for yourself. Because for yourself there is nothing left now. As the story very clearly says, you are already at the fag end of your life. There is nothing great in your life to enjoy now. And in fact, the war, for example, brought the death of all Arjuna's children and the Pandavas' children. There was only one child left in the womb of that Uttara. You know, that Abhimanyu's son's wife was pregnant. So that's why that Parikshit comes out and, later he is the next king. So from the perspective of enjoyment, there is nothing for them. That's a classic example of yoga. So Arjuna wants to run away saying that मेरे को युद्ध ही नहीं करना है. I want to stay in the forest as I've always been doing all life. But Krishna says, I want you to fight because of dedication for the country. Because this fellow as a king is not the right example. We need a good king. And for that sake you have to fight. So there, even though he's fighting and apparently exploiting all the other people, but there is a whole larger picture. You understood? It's like, there's a bad government. The bad government has to be removed only. And for that, somebody has to sacrifice their life. But when a good government comes, that's the ultimate benefit for the country. Well, everybody is happy with that. That is why that is considered as yoga. Because what he does is not for himself. Because he's not interested to become king. And he doesn't get any benefit also in the war. All his children are dead, everything. I mean, from a personal perspective, like a family, if you see, there's nothing. But then the only advantage is the whole country benefited. And for that reason, that's considered as yoga. That's the whole thing. So Krishna actually motivates him to fight in the name of yoga. And that's how the yoga is seen as. Is that okay? Make sense? Any other question before I go ahead? Okay, I think I'll go ahead. Later maybe we'll ask again. Okay, so that leaves us with the last kind of yoga system which we deal with. And also the last part of this entire course. Huh? Yeah. So here, since we are talking about the soul, there is something about the soul that I have yet not kind of spoken, which I need to speak at this particular point. And that being, so just pay attention here. So I think I have mentioned this several times that, for example, a word like dharma, though it is generally, translated as religion, that's not so. That's not the translation. The whole challenge again is with translation of Sanskrit words. Religion in English conveys the idea of faith. Right? It's faith. Religion means faith. And faith by definition is changeable. I can be I can change my faith, right? I can change my religion. People change religion. I may be a theist, I can become an atheist. I can be agnostic, I may become a Christian, a Muslim, I'll do anything. I can change my religion. Religion or faith by definition is changeable. The word dharma in Sanskrit is an unchangeable entity. So what does dharma mean? Dharma in Sanskrit, actually what it means is an intrinsic, inseparable quality of a substance. This is actually called dharma. That means I cannot separate something from it. That's called dharma. So everything has its dharma. You understood? Every relationship has a dharma, for example. Like there is a dharma of a pati, of a husband. There is a dharma of a patni, of a wife. There is a dharma of a child, the dharma of a parent. So when he does that only, then he's called as that. Otherwise he's not called as that only, because then that's considered adharma. Adharma means you're not actually constitutionally doing what constitutes that relationship. So similarly, there is something called dharma of the soul or the atma. That means something that you can never separate from it. And that's what I want to touch on initially. And that the basic dharma of the soul is these two things, to love and to serve. That means love and service is said to be intrinsically connected with the soul. That means there cannot be any soul that will say that I don't want to love or neither will I serve anybody. It's not possible. Every soul in any body wishes to love, wishes to be loved, wishes to serve, wishes to be served. He wants to do something. I mean, hypothetically, just imagine if someone is given an opportunity that I'll give you $1 million and all food and car and everything, but only one condition. You have to live on one island where there is nobody else. And I mean, not that there is some wild animal which will eat you or anything. Nothing. Nobody is there. Nice greenery is there, trees are there. And you have a lot of food also. You can eat, you can just sit there. Though it looks very exciting initially because you're getting $1 million and currently you don't have that. But believe me, it's a very scary proposal. Because a human being cannot live like that. Nobody can live like that. Even the tiger wants to love. Even the bear, which looks ferocious, it needs to love, be loved. So love and service is considered something that's inseparable. And that's actually the dharma of the soul. That means the whole idea is that the soul has to love and serve. Right? And So it's not about being a rich man or a poor man. Even a rich man likes to serve. Like, again, if you travel to Singapore and Southeast Asian countries, there are rules there. Like in India, we don't see those rules, so we don't know. So if you go to Singapore, if you have a dog, if you walk your dog, and your dog passes stool on the road, you have to clean it. Understood? You can't, otherwise the police will fine you. Your dog cannot do anything and you will just walk away. Like here we do all that, because it's Bharat, Mera Bharat Mahan in some ways, So people take their dog out and, they dirty the whole place. But there it's not like that. You take your dog out, your dog passes. So basically you will see that these Singapore people, when they are walking their dog, they will have some paper and some things with them actually. When the dog passes stool, they actually bend down, they collect everything, they put it in a small bag and they walk with that. They clean that place and they go. Now the point is, this is service. This is service. They don't feel bad about that. Why they don't feel bad about that? Because they love. So another important point is, these two are connected. These are not two foreign concepts. These are not two alien things. Love means service. Service means love. That's the point here. That means, if you love someone, you have to do something for that person. Love is not an abstract entity that you say that I love you a lot. Okay, great, but what are you going to do about it? That's the question. If you love someone, then you have to do something. Right? That's what we call dedication. You do something. And similarly, when you do something for someone, you automatically start loving that person. That's another interesting thing. There was one European actually, one lady, I forgot her name. She had come to India and she wrote a book actually. I don't remember the name of the book as well, but I remember the content pretty well. So she basically wanted to understand the whole thing of how does an arranged marriage work in these South Asian countries. Because being from a European, she had only seen, people just marrying out of love. She wanted to see, arranged marriage hota kya? Parents arrange a marriage. What does this mean? Because that concept is primarily not there in Europe, at least today. So she wanted to know, ye kaise chalta hai? I mean, by a marriage, in fact, some of these Europeans, they feel this to be some kind of oppression, where parents force you into a marriage and, they see that. So anyway, so she came to learn and she decided that she will not stay in Indian cities to learn. She will go to the villages because she thought that the Indian cities are anyway pretty urbanized. So she will not get the right Indian picture. So she thought I'll travel in the villages to understand this. So then she wrote her book actually, and her conception totally changed. So she writes that after studying the family structure, I understood that though these marriages are so-called arranged, the love develops because of service. You understood? So the whole point is, initially though you don't love a person whom you married, when you start doing something for that person, you actually start loving that person. Just like a simple example, like if you see in a mother and a child relationship, generally always you will see that the mother's love is higher than what the child loves the mother, generally. And one prime reason is because the mother serves the child and the child only receives service. The child generally, at least through all the youth and everything, doesn't serve the mother, doesn't do anything. So you just only, so then the love is not awakened. So the whole idea here is love and service are connected. Love and service are connected. So if you love, you serve. If you serve, you love. So that connection is there. And this is the underlying philosophy of this Bhakti Yoga system, where the concept is, if you wish to love God, you have to serve God. And if you serve Him, you develop that love. So that's the concept here again. So this is all based on this understanding of what constitutes love and service. And the interconnection between them. So again, just some more things. So, I'm again making this point. No living being is exempt from rendering service to other living beings. Everybody wants to serve. Of course, I put very old photos. Indira Gandhi, John F. Kennedy, dead and gone long back. But why I put their photos is to show that politicians also always keep saying, let me serve you. That's what they're shouting from the microphone. I want to serve the country. Please vote for me. Right? At least they're saying that they wish to serve. Because and this is of course the story of the man with the dog. So you serve the dog because you love the dog. By service you start loving. Because of love you serve. So it's all connected. It's extremely connected. But the understanding in the Bhakti Yoga is that the love and serve. So I think I have that slide with me. So sorry, I skipped this slide. So everybody wishes to love and serve, whether it's a tiger or a leopard or, I mean, any entity. Everyone wants to love. But the whole idea is the expansion of love. That's what Bhakti Yoga sees it as. When Bhakti Yoga sees the whole thing, in fact, Bhakti Yoga, as such, the Yoga Sutras do mention it or talk about it. But for example, it's primarily also seen in the writings of people like, Tukaram. So if you see Tukaram's writings, his abhangas, his songs, that whole focus is bhakti only. That's what he actually, that permeates his system and that comes out in the writings that the person does, So that's what he talks of. So the whole idea of Bhakti Yoga is the expansion of love, which basically goes from me, the family, the society, the nation, humanity, nature and God. So it's considered at the level of Bhakti Yoga, it's considered that love and service for God would include all this love and service as well. It's like inseparable. It's just that you have expanded the scope of your love. That's how Bhakti Yoga sees it. And love and service. So basically the whole idea is that by doing that, so this is again a karma, because you engage in love and service without any expectation. So you become freed from that system of this thing. So yeah, this is another very simple slide to talk about gradations of, in general, worship of God. So approaching God can be, for example, in this example, compared to someone having a relation with his parent. So a lowest category of relationship with parent is what I call as fear. Like, especially children, sometimes, they grow up always in fear of their father. For some reason, the father has been portrayed as one fellow who removes the belt and beats and all that stuff. So fear is the lowest kind of relationship. So there are many people who even approach God out of fear. God is approached primarily out of fear. As someone who will punish us in hell and kind of torment us like anything. The second state of worship is what we call as desire. That means, I want. I like my father because he's like an ATM bank. He gives a lot of money, a lot of cash. I can remove a lot of money from him. So desire. Oh God, give me my daily bread. So I come to him because so many desires get fulfilled. That kind of a thing. A little higher platform is what we call as duty. Because it's the right thing to do. I like my father because that's the right thing to do. Because he has done so much for me, so I should be dutiful and I should reciprocate. So basically these are kind of, gradations of worship. Fear, desire, duty. But the ultimate one is what we call as love. Where, right? So that's considered like, so this is again the connection to Bhakti Yoga system. So Bhakti Yoga, from the Bhakti Yoga perspective, one is supposed to gradually elevate one's understanding of God as well. So that's how Bhakti Yoga sees it. So as I told you earlier, Karma Yoga connects the external senses. Jnana Yoga connects the mind basically. Ashtanga Yoga connects the intellect. And this one connects the soul. So, but the goal is said to be the same. It's just that the process is different. I'll end very soon. So Bhakti Yoga also uses what's called as mantra in general. And this word comes from two words called mind and deliverance. So the whole idea of a mantra is sound that frees the mind. So just like as I told you, every yoga system, one important goal is to free the mind. Yoga chitta vritti nirodha. So, the mind has to be freed. And that's why, especially in Bhakti Yoga and even in Dhyana Yoga actually, this is common to both. In both their systems, focusing the mind on the mantra is considered very important. It doesn't come so much in Karma Yoga, but in the other two yoga systems, it comes a lot. And that's how they see. So I've just listed a list of Bhakti traditions in India, and this is one simple experiment which was done in one US university, where what they did was, they had people, kind of take some of these mantras of the Indian tradition, and what they did basically was, they analyzed the brain wave frequency. That means the cycles per second your brain, the frequency of it. It is said that if it is below 3, it is sleepy, 3 to 8 is drowsy, 13 to 18 is active. That means when you are right now, you're supposed to be active. Of course, some of you I see are 3 or 8 as well. You're kind of sleepy and drowsy after 8 hours of hard work in college. but generally you're supposed to be active. Above 18 is called hyperactive. So it is said that when the brain goes hyperactive, then that is an indication of tension, blood pressure, several other diseases that come up. So there was this experiment by one David Wolf. So what this gentleman did is, he made students for a long period of time use these mantras, and he basically tested their brain frequency and found out that prolonged chanting of mantras, doing this meditation, dhyana in general, helps one to be in what is called as the alpha zone, which is considered the relaxed alert zone, which basically helps a person in his normal life avoid going to the hyperactive zone. And because he avoids going there, he tends to be, healthy and fit in life in general. So that's again a connection of how yoga makes it very clear that the purpose is all-round well-being in terms of body, mind and soul. Right? So with that we end the session, and I'm done with maybe another 5 minutes of questions, if any, and then I take ahead. Someone else, I'll just come to you in case somebody else has any question. Anybody else with a question? Before I go back to him. You might as well ask something, because I'm going to take some questions anyway, so kuch to pucho. There are many people I never heard their voice itself. We have almost finished the philosophy course. First bench you said, no question. No doubt, huh? Everything is very clear. Great, some people are like that. You have a question? One second. Oh, question, I'll go to her. I'll come back to you, don't worry. We have 10 minutes of question time. Last bench. Ask your question.
Does akarma...
One second, can you take the mic close and speak into it?
Does akarma account as good karma?
No, it doesn't. It's not considered good. Good basically means the purpose of that good karma that I mentioned is to do something with an expectation of a good reaction. You understood? That means I do something. See, it's all about the state of your mind. Am I doing something to get something good in this world itself? Or I'm doing something not for that. So, akarma basically is defined as no karma. It is defined as something that frees one from that system. Neither good or bad. Any other elaboration on that? Pass the mic ahead. Yeah. Just speak into the mics.
Sir, according to Sankhya, we get whatever our karma in previous life and this life, we get punishment on the earth only. On earth only.
No, not like that. You can get anywhere. The punishment enjoyment is everywhere. Okay, go ahead. Ask your question.
Means we get a particular life.
Life, yeah.
Yeah. Then why this hell, and there are so many punishments written in Garuda Purana, which are materialistic, but they are punishment for our soul.
See, it's like if somebody has done something extremely obnoxious, he needs some special treatment before getting the ordinary treatment. It's like that, in short. There are so many actions that people do which everything cannot be given on earth also, the kind of activities. So it's like it's a special kind of bonus, for your activity.
Sir, but in Garuda Puran there are punishment, just like written in, just like they are written Kumbhi Pakam, means they fry the...
Yeah, understood. So that's what I'm telling you. Every act cannot be rewarded or punished in the world itself. That is the need for that. But they are considered temporary only. They are just considered an accelerated form of paying quick. It's like quick EMI pay. Yeah. Okay, great.
So is like positive karma...
Hey, one second. Everyone has to pay attention to a question. The question is not, hey, hello, second bench, third bench. You have a question? You can ask.
Is positive karma can be considered as cooperation, because we do good for others as well as for us, and we expect something good in return.
Yes. That's that. Anything that's in the three modes can be positive. So that sattva is positive karma only. Only when you give yourself completely for someone, then it is like that. Otherwise, it's not. Good question. In the mic.
So what if a person does a karma his entire life? So does that person become free from rebirth cycle?
Yes, that's the goal ultimately of yoga system.
So he attains moksha at the end of it.
Huh?
Moksha.
Yeah,
the
that's
moksha.
that's what it is. In fact, I don't have time to elaborate on what are the types of mokshas and stuff like that, but that's what it is. That's the goal of it in another way. But the purpose of yoga is not seen only from the sense of the other world. That's why I did not focus on that. Because that makes it look a little too, and that is a fact that it looks too pessimistic. That you're thinking only about the other world, not about the world that you're living. That is not the case. That's why you see that Krishna's whole talk of Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna, where he talks about all these 4 yoga systems, is basically to motivate him to do yoga with the purpose of living in the world. The other world stuff that you get is just a bonus. The prime idea is what you get in this world, what you live back in this world. You understood?
Kind of.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is, the goal of yoga is not simply from the concept of looking at moksha as in I want to just get out. In some way, that seems very pessimistic, isn't it? You're only thinking how to get out from here.
Yeah, but then like each life would just focus on getting moksha. Like
Yeah, so that's why I'm saying it's not like that. The yoga simultaneously talks about how you live in this world in excellence and get the benefit of the other world, which is anyway not in your control. That's how it is. Okay? 1 second. Yeah, so that's why I never mentioned it in that sense. That's why yoga is not done primarily for moksha. It is not done in that sense. It is done from a dedication. That is just a concomitant result. You understood? It's like, for example, if a son is having a very good relation with his big business father, automatically he inherits his property. He is not thinking that I will be good with my father so that this chap will write his property to me. The goal is to be a good son. But then that's a concomitant result. It just comes automatically that he also gets the property. But if he's thinking that I just want this property, then he will do many other things. He can poison his father and kind of finish off quickly so that he'll quickly get the property. People do that, right? So that's not the real thing. Like it talks about in this world, and then the other world is a automatic advantage of it. Yeah. Any last question? Yeah, that's the last one.
So to serve is to love. So what if someone is forced to serve someone, like some arranged marriages are forced on someone?
I know. One second. Forced service is not love. Like for example, slavery. The Spanish people came to Africa, took crores of Negroes and took them to America and made them work very hard by whipping them. They served. There was no love over there. That's forced. Service, spontaneous. Now about the question that you asked about arranged marriage in general, that is not like that. It is not necessary that there the service is forced. That the service is spontaneous only. As in, it's just that because you're bound in that relationship, you decide to serve. Right? And because you decide to serve, you fall in love. That's how it is. As simple as that. Yes? Okay. Thank you very much for your patient hearing. 1 second. Attendance. I missed out attendance of